So you may or may not have heard already, but Riot just announced the dissolution of the OPL and the closure of the Riot City office. I just wanted to put a quick video together to sort of share my thoughts why I think it's going to massively impact a lot of people in the region. So background maybe as to why things got to this point, and maybe some potential silver linings. Like there are simply just like major challenges within Oceania that a lot of people, even people in the region, but especially globally, don't really understand that haven't been tackled properly since the beginning, and I think sort of led to where things went today. So context for those who don't know, I founded the Chiefs Esports Club back in 2014. I've been part of essentially Riot's competitive League of Legends ecosystem in Oceania since that. I recently stepped back from the org at the beginning of 2020. I've experienced firsthand the ups and downs of Oceanic League of Legends. It was hard for me to sort of share my thoughts on what happened, on paper and throw us through social media. Like everyone was told, quite late and quite close to the announcement. So yeah, in terms of speaking from the beginning, from like a timeline perspective, like, Riot opened the Cine offices and Oceanic servers in 2013. Prior to that, we all had to play on the NA servers. And from a competitive standpoint, 2013 and 2014 had the regional style events with a live grand final, usually at some sort of convention like PAX. And the winners of the tournaments in sort of the mid year for both those years were the ones that qualified for wildcards, which is what the play-ins were at the time. In 2015 was when the OPL officially launched. And this is when Riot started paying the players for per game played. From 2016 to 2016, the format was a regular season, online regular season with studio semis and a big live, grand finals event. That was completely run by Riot and the external outsourced production team. From my understanding, these events cost upwards of seven figures to run, but there were some of my greatest memories like Luna Park and Brisbane at the time. So in 2017 was when Riot moved all the games to the Riot Studios for a live format. In that year, the teams were given like a shit ton of financial support, through the form of stipends to things such as rent, the setup for the gaming house, utilities, and of course the player salaries as well. I can't quite share the exact figures, but it would have been upwards of 100K per team. This was a massive investment from Riot's end, big dent in their bottom line. And as a result of that, the live final events were scrapped in favor of studio finals for both splits that year. 2018, the support was scaled back. But this was also the year where several teams and several orgs, maybe rightfully so, felt that the trajectory and the level of publisher support that Riot had shown kind of justified significant investment in the scene. Player salaries sort of skyrocketed this year, and perhaps at a somewhat unsustainable level. And then 2019 and 2020, the support was scaled even further back to this year. There was absolutely no financial support from Riot at all, which was a bit of a headline, I guess, at the start of the year. As a result of that, the OPL as a whole has sort of bled money, both through the high cost of production and labor here in Australia, team contribution, and consequently like an unequal sort of revenue growth for Riot and the orgs. I believe it was in 2018, maybe a little bit earlier, that there was a global shift towards Riot's LL esports system sort of being more financially prudent, I guess. I think this was evident in, so you see a lot of the commercial deals, being closed by Riot for Worlds and LCS and LEC. There was a lot more of a focus on, the esports product being financially viable and not sort of like a marketing spend that they were kind of just throwing money at, I guess. This is just from my perspective, of course. Teams were made aware of this at the time, and honestly, towards the end of 2019, like things did get quite dire. Riot had to make a lot of strides in the OPL from a business development perspective. This what's happened was always going to be a risk at the time. The problem is like OC has always fallen into that awkward middle ground. Like we never pulled enough weight to sort of attract big sponsors and revenue through either Riot's in-house partnerships team or partnerships with external organizations like the AFL or Lagardère. I'm not entirely sure why. But they always seem to, there was a big issue in my opinion in terms of like, because of that, like there wasn't the resources to put into growth strategies, such as content, community outreach, social media. I'd always felt like, this was incredibly inconsistent, and at times seemed to be quite lacking. For example, I think it was 2017 and 2018. Loz started working at Riot in terms of social media and the social strategy and community engagement was looking really, really positive at that time, and felt like it was on a really good trajectory. But then obviously they stopped that, and again, like, it's just kind of been downhill from there. And even from a team perspective, you see a lot of these orgs kind of see the signs. Bombers and Mammoth in 2019 both won, split one, split two respectively, and then sold their teams immediately. And obviously COVID could have had an impact on Riot falling short on their 2020 revenue targets, but from what I understand, this decision was driven by Riot Global. And I have no doubt that Riot OCE fought incredibly hard for the region up until the very end. So in terms of what's going to happen now, who knows? Like, obviously in the announcement, they said that there would still be a path to MSI and Worlds, which is quite significant. I understand that there was talk of potentially some sort of outsourced league or outsourcing the tournaments, maybe Garena style or something along those lines. Like, what's going to happen to the players? Like, no doubt it's going to be incredibly tough for the majority of them. Like, this was always a possibility, but I think players and orgs were told, pretty much a couple of hours before the official announcement. There's the stuff about the NA residency, like, that only really affects the top players in the region. Especially now, there's going to be a huge boatload of players that are going to be looking for, import opportunities, and there just really isn't like that many available slots. But yeah, like, is there a silver lining? I don't know, honestly. Like, potentially, like, a complete restructure of like the domestic League of Legends infrastructure. I think that's important. The damage has been done already. Like, it was really kind of backed into a corner, but it's never too late to sort of start that. I'm hoping personally, just with the new format for like MSI and Worlds qualification opportunities, both of which are still extremely valuable. I'm hoping Riot will potentially ease ownership rules in OC specifically, and let NA sort of open up like academies or training opportunities and facilities down here. Maybe not brand them as like C9, TSM, Liquid, because I know that's always been an issue with like why the ownership rule came in, but it is a minuscule cost for them compared to their budgets to like open a facility or have some sort of investment. Maybe send 2 NA players down here, because obviously OC can still I'm assuming OC can still import 2 players for their tournaments, and then develop 3 Oceanic players with them, and have them sort of compete through the OC tournament, and potentially get to MSI and Worlds, and then use that as a development opportunity for them, to potentially play in the LCS later. I think that has less impact on any changes to the LCS to accommodate for the new OC players, and sort of generates a little bit more interest through the NA orgs being involved. But at the end of the day, like, obviously this is incredibly sad. I've been involved in the ecosystem for so long. There are so many great people, players, staff, orgs that were reliant on the OPL in some way. So that's really going to be tough for them. And especially during COVID, I kind of just hope everyone shows them the same support that they have for the last 7 years, or for the OPL for the last 6 years, 6 years or 7 years. I can't even remember now. But yeah, they're going to need it, and we're really going to need to sort of show them that there is an opportunity in the future. But yeah, it's really, really sort of tough pill to swallow. Even if we knew it was potentially going to come, I don't think anyone really expected it to ever happen. So yeah.